Prologue, city of Akkad, circa 2300 BCE. The first sign was the stillness of the oil lamp. The flame had been restless all evening, shivering in draughts from the alley, bending when neighbors opened their doors, flaring when the kiln across the courtyard belched heat. But now, in the depth of the night, with the streets quiet and the clay walls exhaling the day's warmth, the flame stood upright. No waver, no flicker, as if the air itself had gone solid. Enhedu closed her reed stylus over the clay tablet and frowned. "Father?" she called softly. No answer. Her father was at the temple, she remembered. He had been summoned hours ago to recite prayers over a caravan setting off at dawn. Her older brothers were asleep on the roof, mouths open, snoring faintly in the dust-soft dark. The room seemed smaller suddenly, its corners deeper. She reached out and cupped her hand to the lamp glass. No draught, no breath of moving air. Outside, the city murmured in distant, ocean-like waves. Dogs, a late passerby, the rush of the Euphrates. But inside, the sound died at the threshold. Her stomach clenched, then the table trembled. It was subtle at first, a shiver that ran through the rough wood and into her elbows. She thought of an ox cart rolling past, but the vibration did not match the usual clatter. It was steadier, cleaner, and it was rising. Clay jars on the shelf rattled. The loose tablets stacked beside her clinked. The lamp flame, which should have leapt wildly, did something else instead. It leaned. Enhedu stared as the flame bowed itself toward the far wall, toward the niche where the strange tablet lay. Her father had brought that one home 3 months ago, wrapped in cloth like a newborn. He had not said exactly where he'd gotten it. A foreign trader, he'd muttered, one eye on the door. A curiosity, nothing more. It was older than their usual accounts and contracts. The clay darker, the edges chipped, the surface worn smooth where countless fingers had touched it before being buried, who knew where. The signs incised upon it were not true cuneiform as she'd been taught to write, but a cousin, a script that seemed to think in curves more than wedges. Her father had set it in the niche and forbade her from copying it. Some texts belong to the gods alone, he'd said. Tonight, the old tablet was humming. She did not hear it exactly. There was no audible tone, but the air around it vibrated, a shimmer like heat above summer stones. The lamp flame bent toward it, a supplicant. The stylus slipped from her fingers. Enhedu stood slowly. The floor under her bare feet buzzed like the throat of a great unseen beast. She looked toward the door, half expecting a priest to appear and tell her this was normal. The gods liked to sing to themselves sometimes, and no one came. The tablet in the niche quivered, her breath locked. "Ishtar, guard me," she whispered. "Nabu, Lord of Scribes, hold my hand steady." The prayer tasted thin and dry. Something touched the back of her neck. It was not a hand, not exactly. More like a pressure, a warm insistence just below the skull. Her knees almost buckled. The hum in the air sharpened, the clay jars on the shelf rattling to a steady rhythm. Her eyes rolled up. When they opened again, they were full of light. She crossed the room without feeling her feet move, the old tablet always in the center of her vision. Her right hand reached for the reed stylus on the floor, fingers closing with unusual strength. Her left found a fresh tablet in the basket, soft clay, still damp, ready to receive. She sat at the low table. The lamp leaned harder toward the niche, as if jealous of where the attention lay. Her hand rose. The hum synchronized with her heartbeat. She began to write. It was not cuneiform, not the blocky, precise wedges she'd spent years mastering. Her reed tip, sharpened to make good, clean impressions, moved in curves, tracing arcs and loops that should have been impossible with that tool. The clay yielded in ways it should not have yielded, taking strokes that ran into one another like flowing water. She had the dim sense of watching someone else's hand, of being seated just behind her own eyes, unable to move anything but her breath. Lines filled the tablet, not just random patterns, structures, bands of repeating elements nested at varying intervals. It felt less like putting words down and more like transcribing the beating of a heart. She did not know how long she wrote. Time dissolved into motion, into hum, into the persistent faint warmth at the back of her head. When the stylus finally dropped from her fingers, the vibration cut off. The lamp flame snapped upright. Sound slammed back into the world. A distant shout, a dog's bark, the splash of a bucket somewhere in the alley. Enhedu gasped, her chest seizing as if she'd been underwater. Her hands were coated in clay up to the wrists. Her fingernails were dark crescents. The tablet in front of her was covered edge to edge with strange script. She stared. The characters meant nothing. Not in Sumerian, not in Akkadian, not in any tongue she'd heard sung in the market or muttered in the temple queues. And yet the sight of them made something deep in her spine vibrate in recognition. "Father," she whispered. The room trembled once more, this time with a single, deep pulse that shook dust from the ceiling. The old tablet in the wall niche gave a quiet, decisive crack. A sliver fell from its edge, landing on the floor with a soft clink. Enhedu flinched. Then, very faintly, in the silence that followed, she heard a sound. A murmur like many voices speaking at a distance, but carrying only a single, clear word. She did not know its tongue, but it translated itself in her mind. "Awaken." She pressed her clay-smeared hands to her ears. The echoes of that word would follow her the rest of her life. Chapter 1. Lisbon, present day. Lisbon in winter had a tired, damp beauty. Stucco walls mottled by rain. Laundry still strung bravely across alleys. Tram cables sketching lines against a low grey sky. Mira had always meant to visit for the food, the music, the blue tiles, the light everyone raved about. Instead, she stepped onto the cracked pavement outside a nondescript apartment building in Arroyos, with a backpack full of sensor data and a head full of humming stone. Her taxi pulled away. The street swallowed the sound. The building in front of her looked like every other on the block. Graffiti scrawled along the bottom story. Iron balconies above, satellite dishes clinging like barnacles. Someone had once painted the door a hopeful green. It was now more rust than color. At the buzzer, a paper label had been taped over the engraved names. Silva/Rocha were crossed out. Below, in penned capitals, V.J. Varela. Under that, in a cramped, almost apologetic script, J. Vale. She pressed it. A moment later, the intercom crackled. "Yes? Jonas Vale?" she said, keeping her voice neutral. A pause. "Depends who's asking." "Mira Ellison," she said. "We spoke about the anomaly at St. Catherine's." Another pause, longer. The line hissed faintly. "You really came," he said. "Most people hang up when I start talking about mimetic hazards." "I specialize in stubbornness," she said. "And you used phrases like weaponized ideas in the same sentence as my field site. That tends to get my attention." A low breath that might have been a laugh. "Third floor, no elevator. The stairwell light doesn't work, so watch your step." The buzzer clicked. The door unlocked with a dull thunk. Inside, the stairwell smelled of dust, old cooking oil, and something floral trying bravely to cover both. Mira climbed narrow steps, lit only by the meager spill from the tiny street-facing windows. Her thighs protested from days of trudging up and down monastery staircases. She ignored them. On the third floor, a door stood ajar. She nudged it open. The apartment was less paranoid bunker and more shabby professor's office. Bookshelves overflowing, papers stacked in tottering towers, a small kitchenette in the corner with a kettle and a single chipped mug. A window looked out over a tangle of rooftops and antennae. The air smelled faintly of coffee and aging paper. The man who climbed up from behind a stack of boxes was taller than she'd expected, lean almost to gauntness, with dark hair overdue for a cut and a beard that fell into the awkward space between intentional and forgot to shave for a month. His eyes behind square glasses were sharper than the rest of him suggested. He wore jeans, a threadbare T-shirt with the logo of a long-defunct newspaper, and an expression that said he'd seen too much and trusted too little. "Dr. Ellison," he said, wiping his hand on his jeans before offering it. "Welcome to my palace of poor life decisions." She shook. His grip was warm, firm, slightly ink-stained. "Thanks for seeing me," she said. "Curiosity is a disease," he said. "Yours brought you here. Mine made me open the door. We're both already infected. Might as well compare symptoms. He gestured her toward a chair whose upholstery had seen better decades. She sat, resting her backpack at her feet, laptop case leaning against her leg. "Water? Coffee? Cheap wine masquerading as something else?" he asked. "Water's fine," she said. Her stomach had been in a knot since she left the island. Alcohol sounded like throwing gasoline on that. He poured water from a bottle into a cleanish glass and handed it to her. Then he settled opposite, on a chair that creaked ominously, and studied her. "Let's start with this," he said. "You've already been in the resonance chamber under St. Catherine's. You've already touched the book, the codex. You've already had at least one episode of automatic writing. And despite a friendly warning from a stranger on an encrypted line, you got on a plane and came to see me. Why?" The matter-of-factness of the question disarmed her. "You're not much for small talk, are you?" she said. "Small talk is a luxury for people not currently standing in the blast radius," he said. She exhaled. "Fine." She reached into her backpack, took out the notebook, and flipped it open to the page filled with the strange script. She slid it across the coffee table. "Because of this," she said, "and because I don't like not knowing what's happening to my own brain." He picked it up carefully as if it might bite. The symbols glinted faintly in the afternoon light. Even here, far from basalt walls and humming stone, they seemed to shiver. "Tell me," he said. She told him. Not everything, not yet. The circular library she kept compressed to a shorthand. A recurring dream space with 8 lamps, books missing, writing episodes. But she gave him the essential sequence. The seismographs, the hum, the book, the whisper of her name, the records Elia had shown her, the letter written to her decades before she was born, the sharpened resonance when she touched the codex directly. He listened without interrupting, only occasionally scribbling notes in a ragged pad. When she mentioned the Silence Bureau's surveillance, he nodded once, as if confirming an old suspicion. When she finished, the room felt smaller. "Scientifically respectable enough for you?" he asked quietly, tapping the notebook page. "Scientifically horrifying," she said. "But yes, the data doesn't fit any natural phenomenon I know. The coupling between the tremor pattern and my dream writing is too strong to dismiss." "It fits something," he said. "It fits a pattern I've been watching for years. And it fits a file they tried very hard to erase." He set the notebook down, stood, and went to a metal filing cabinet in the corner. It was newer than the battered ones Mira remembered from grad school, a cheap office supply store purchase rather than a Cold War relic. But it still looked out of place in the chaos of books and boxes. He unlocked the bottom drawer with a key on a chain around his neck. Paper rustled as he pulled out a worn cardboard folder. The tab read simply, CODEX. He came back, clearing space on the coffee table, and opened it. Inside were photocopies, printouts, and a few glossy photographs annotated in the neat, pinched handwriting of an anxious bureaucrat. Mira glimpsed official seals, redacted lines, internal reference codes. The top page bore a bold header, Silence Bureau, Memetic Hazard Assessment Report, Subject, Codex Artifact, St. Catherine of the Deep, SB-17A. Her throat tightened. Jonas flipped past it, studying, then slid a photograph toward her. It showed an object on a stone shelf under harsh overhead light, an old book, leather faded, corners reinforced with metal. Even in the grainy print, she recognized it instantly, the codex under the monastery. "This is a scan from 1963, Jonas said. The Bureau sent a team to evaluate anomalous reports from the monks. They found seismic irregularities in this thing. They didn't know what to make of it, so they did what bureaucracies always do when faced with something new. They wrote a memo." He handed her another page. This one was a typed report, heavily redacted. "Artifact exhibits low-frequency vibration in absence of obvious external stimulus, coupling to local microseismic events. Subjective reports from monastic inhabitants indicate auditory experiences. Voices, chanting correlated with close proximity to artifact during resonance episodes." Mira skimmed faster. "Initial assessment, potential Class 3 memetic structure, incompletely instantiated in written form. Recommend containment in situ, further study deferred until appropriate counter-memetic protocols developed." "This is insane," she murmured. They're writing about it like it's a pathogen. A pathogen that uses text as a host and brains as a vector, Jonas said. That's what a memetic structure is, at least in their terminology. He spread more pages out, maps with red dots, tables of dates. Here, he said, this is where it gets worse. She leaned in. The table listed a series of years stretching back centuries. Next to each, a brief note. 1082 CE, miracle in scriptorium, unknown script produced, tremors reported. 1610 CE, visions during night vigils, automatic writing in unknown characters. 1912 CE, none experiences dissociative episode, produces unidentifiable notation. 1978 CCE, Sister Magdalena, recurrent dreams, further data lost in landslide incident. At the top, in a different hand, someone had written preliminary pattern, approximately 400 to 600-year intervals early, shortening in recent centuries, correlated with episodes of regional seismic anomalies. Beneath that, underlined twice, see also Akkad tablet file, Ashanti codex, Norbu scroll, etc. Ashanti, Norbu, Mira murmured. These are names. Places and people, Jonas said. Ashanti Kingdom, West Africa. Tenzin Norbu was a Tibetan monk in the late 18th century. The Bureau has files on all of them. They use different religions, different metaphors, but the structure is always the same. Someone sleeps near a resonant stone, wakes up and finds they've written something they don't understand. Dream writers, she said, remembering Sister Elia's phrase. Dream scribes, he nodded. The Bureau calls them transcription vectors, he said. Elegant in a sociopathic kind of way. She sifted through the file, fingers trembling slightly. Photocopies of old manuscripts, photographs of stone tablets, fragments of scrolls. In each, the script, though rendered in different media, shared underlying patterns. Curves nested in precise arrangements, clusters of small marks at regular intervals, repeating motifs that seemed less alphabetical than algorithmic. It can't be the same language, she said, half to herself. These are separated by thousands of miles and years. Writing systems evolve. Unless someone is bypassing the local systems and injecting its own, Jonas said. Someone, she echoed. Something, he corrected. Call it a pattern, a structure, a mind if you're feeling poetic. Whatever it is, it uses the local host's hand to write itself down. It said, "You are late," she murmured. He watched her carefully. It spoke in English. Not exactly, she said, more like meaning without words, but yes, it knew my name. He was quiet for a moment. I thought they were exaggerating, he said finally. In the Madrid file, I thought maybe they were priming people, making them see demons in static. But the waveforms from your site. He tapped the closed laptop at her feet. You sent me a snippet. The harmonic structure matches some of the EEG patterns from a small, ugly experiment they did in the early 2000s. What experiment? She asked warily. They exposed volunteers to controlled psychoacoustic stimuli and measured their brain activity, he said. White coats with good intentions, trying to see if specific sound patterns could induce consistent visions. It mostly produced nausea and headaches, but in a few subjects they saw something else. He pulled out another sheet. This one was a printout of a graph. Time on the x-axis, frequency on the y-axis, color indicating power. The shape of the peaks made Mera's skin prickle. It's very similar, she said. Almost as if the artifact under your monastery is broadcasting on that same channel, he said. She exhaled slowly, feeling like she was standing on a narrow bridge over an abyss. Every new piece of information made the gap look deeper. You said the Bureau knows about St. Catherine's, she said. Do they know about the others? The Ashanti Codex? The Akkad tablet? He nodded grimly. That's what I wanted to show you next. He flipped to a map, the world in faded colors with 8 red circles marked on it, one on the North Atlantic coast, St. Catherine's, another near Lisbon, inland a bit, others in West Africa, the Middle East, Tibet, the Indian subcontinent, East Asia, South America. At first I thought these were just places where weird texts showed up, he said. But cross-reference them with seismic anomalies and you get something else. He handed her a transparent overlay. It bore the outlines of global tectonic plates and prominent fault zones. When she laid it over the map, several of the red circles sat uncomfortably close to known geological hotspots. The Bureau thinks these are points in some resonant network, he said. Places where whatever this is can most easily couple into the crust. Or, she said slowly, places where something in the crust can most easily couple into us. He raised his glass to her. Welcome to the club, Dr. Ellison. You're officially thinking like a conspiracy journalist. She smiled weakly. I prefer to call it systems analysis. Whatever you call it, it got you on a plane here, he said. And it's what's going to get you into a hole under an old fortress soon. She blinked. A hole under... He pointed to the red circle near Lisbon on the map. This, he said, is the second codex. Chapter 2. The fortress was older than most of Lisbon and more stubborn than all of it. Technically, the ruins were a tourist site, a decaying Moorish castle perched on a hill, its broken towers offering postcard views of the city and the river. But the real bones of the place lay deeper, beneath layers of conquest and renovation. Most people don't come this far down, Jonas said, his voice echoing off damp stone. The guided tours do the walls, the courtyard, the nice safe bits. They don't advertise the collapsed cistern. That's comforting, Mira said, ducking under a low arch. Her headlamp beam swung ahead, catching the glimmer of water. The air in the passage was cool and heavy. It smelled of old limestone, mold, and something metallic she recognized from caves all over the world, the tang of minerals leaching slowly from rock. She followed Jonas carefully, boots skidding on slick steps. He moved with the ease of someone who'd done this many times. His backpack clinked faintly with equipment. You're sure we have permission for this? She asked. We have permission for the top 2 levels, like everyone else, he said. No one specifically told us not to go into the disused service tunnels. I find the universe often works better if you don't burden it with too many questions. That's not how ethics work, she said. That's exactly how journalism works, he shot back. Besides, the Bureau's been down here a lot. I've seen their schematics. They didn't collapse this tunnel because it's too dangerous. They collapsed it because they didn't want anyone else following. He swung around a bend. The narrow passage opened into a larger chamber, its ceiling supported by rough columns. Puddles mirrored their lights. Above, between cracks, she glimpsed the ghost of daylight. At the far side, a section of wall had been crudely bricked up and then, at some later date, violently reopened. Broken bricks littered the floor. A hole yawned beyond, big enough for a person to crawl through. You did that? She asked. God, no, he said. I'm reckless, not suicidal. This was open when I found it years ago. I suspect some bored maintenance crew did the heavy lifting, maybe to access old cistern infrastructure. They probably got spooked by the hum and left. He dropped to one knee and peered through. Still clear, he said. You all right with tight spaces? Depends what's humming at the other end, she said. He gave her a quick, wry smile. Spoken like someone who's already heard it once. He wriggled through. She followed, trying not to think about the weight of stone above. The passage beyond sloped downward. The air grew cooler, the smell of surface dust fading into something deeper, untouched. Her headlamp picked out marks on the walls, old tool scars, some as sharp as if they'd been carved yesterday. Then she felt it. A faint, familiar pressure against her ribs, a subtle tightening behind the ears, the hum. It was weaker than at St. Catherine's, but it was there, thrumming at the edge of perception, just under hearing. Jonas felt it too. His shoulders stiffened. Every time, he muttered, like standing on the chest of a sleeping god. They emerged into a cavern. It hadn't always been one. The chisel marks on the ceiling and walls spoke of an engineered space that time and water had played with. The floor was uneven, carved in places, eroded in others. Thin sheets of calcite draped some walls like curtains. Stalactites grew slowly from leaks. In the center, on a raised stone platform, something waited. Mira's breath shortened. It was a book. Not identical to the codex at St. Catherine's, not a twin, but close enough to make her chest ache. The binding here was darker, almost black, with traces of what might once have been gold tooling now nearly vanished. The corners were shod with metal greened by time. It lay on a carved plinth, no glass between it and the air. Around the edges of the platform, ancient script circled in shallow relief, Arabic characters interwoven with geometric designs. Someone long ago had inscribed a verse here. Mira's Arabic was halting, but she recognized fragments. There is a book known only to God. Jesus, she whispered. Wrong prophet, Jonas murmured automatically, then more seriously, yeah. The hum in the chamber coiled around them, stronger near the platform. It had the same 33 hertz feel as the monastery, a pressure more than a sound vibrating in gut and bone. She stepped closer, reflexively reaching for the accelerometer in her pocket, then stopping. She hadn't brought instruments to this first visit. Jonas had insisted they scout quietly. "It's been here. How long?" she asked, circling the platform. "Old reports say it was found when they remodeled the cisterns, sometime in the late 12th century, he said. A mason opened a sealed niche, and there it was. The locals thought it was a cursed Quran at first, then some Sufi mystic's codex, then a Christian heretic's gospel. When weird dreams and night tremors started, the stories got weirder." "And the Bureau?" she asked. "The Bureau found it in the 50s, like St. Catherine's," he said. "Different field team, same reaction. Classify, observe, try not to touch." "You touched," she said. "Once," he said. His face shuttered briefly. "It didn't like me. Or maybe it liked me too much. Either way, I'm not volunteering again." She took a slow breath and moved to the platform's edge. The hum wrapped around her like the beginnings of a migraine aura. Her fingers tingled as they had in the basement under the monastery. This time, though, she was not alone. She reached into her backpack and drew out a padded case. Inside, wrapped in cloth, lay the first codex. Getting it out of St. Catherine's had been harder than she'd expected. The prior had balked at the idea of the book leaving the monastery. It had never left in its centuries there. To remove it felt like violating something sacred. In the end, what persuaded them wasn't her data or her arguments about global networks. It was Elia placing a hand on the prior's shoulder and saying very softly, "It has been singing the same song for a long time. Perhaps it is time it heard another verse." They'd packed it carefully with prayers and plastic foam. On the plane, Mira had kept the case under her feet, one hand on it the whole way, as if it were a temperamental animal that might bolt. Now, as she unwrapped it, the hum shifted. The book from St. Catherine's vibrated in her hands. The one on the plinth answered. The interfering wave pattern between them beat against her palms. Jonas swore under his breath. "You sure about this?" "No," she said. "But I didn't come here to look at photographs." She set the first codex gently beside the second on the stone platform. The effect was immediate. The baseline hum in the chamber split. Two distinct nodes emerged, each one centered on a book. The frequencies were almost identical, but not quite. The interference pattern between them produced slow pulses, like the beating of an enormous heart. The stone underfoot quivered. Fine dust trickled from the ceiling. Mira's heartbeat tried to match the pulses. She fought to keep her breathing steady. The two codices vibrated harder. Their pages were closed, but the edges fluttered, as if the text inside were restless. On some deep instinct, she placed her hands lightly on both covers at once. The world narrowed. The hum shot up her arms, through her clavicles, into her skull. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was overwhelming. Information pouring through channels not designed for it. She saw the circular library again, sharper now. This time the 8 hanging lamps were lit. Only 6 shelves were occupied. 2 spaces gaped empty. Books floated between them, not resting on wood or stone, but suspended in midair, covers turning slowly to catch unseen light. One of those books, the one nearest her, glowed with a familiar dark leather, corners shod with metal. St. Catherine's Codex. Another, further away, bore the Moorish binding she'd just touched. They drifted closer to each other, their pages riffle-fluttering in a wind that smelled of dust, salt, and something faintly metallic. When they met, the sound they made was not the thump of leather on leather, but a chord. A real chord this time, audible in the dream space, low, rich, woven from multiple tones that beat against each other in complex patterns. It resonated in her bones, her teeth, the delicate bones of her inner ear. Her vision blurred with synesthetic spillover. Colors flared with each harmonic. Deep blue, amber, a green she associated with northern lights. The other shelves shuddered. In their empty slots, faint outlines appeared. Possibilities, waiting. In the real cavern, Jonah staggered as dust fell around them in a fine, choking veil. "Mira!" he shouted. "Whatever you're doing, maybe don't do it so hard." She heard him as if through water. The two codices on the platform rolled toward each other, drawn by a force beyond friction. Their spines met. The hum leapt. It became language. Not immediately coherent language. This wasn't a Hollywood moment where alien glyphs rearranged themselves into neat English subtitles. But the vibration acquired structure, syllabic rhythm, cadence. In her head, fragments surfaced. Sumerian, from her undergraduate dabblings in ancient languages. Latin, from the monastery records. Snatches of Arabic, from the inscription on the plinth. Underneath them all, something older, pre-linguistic, pattern itself. The chord swelled, resolved. We are many pages of one book. The thought was not hers. It arrived, fully formed, accompanied by an image of the floating library tilting, turning to reveal shelves that stretched beyond sight. Her knees buckled. Hands grabbed her shoulders, shaking. "Mira, hey, come back!" Jonas's voice insisted, closer now. "Breathe, you're turning grey. This is not a good color on you." She sucked in air like someone surfacing. Her hands flew off the books. The hum broke. The codices stilled. The chamber's vibrations subsided to its usual unsettling low murmur. She sagged against Jonah's, chest heaving. "Don't do that again, without warning," he said, though his grip on her was supportive. "Jesus!" She tried to laugh, coughed instead. "You heard something," she managed. "I heard the ceiling deciding whether it wanted to stay up," he said. "And I thought I heard voices, echoes. Hard to tell. My brain was busy cataloguing imminent ways to die." She straightened shakily. The codices lay side by side on the plinth, innocuous. Her head rang with aftertones. "It spoke," she said. He looked at her. In the headlamp beam, his eyes were very dark. "What did it say?" he asked. She worked her jaw. The words felt heavy. "That they're pages," she said. "Parts of one thing." "One what?" he asked. She shook her head. "It didn't say. Or it did, and my brain filed it under later." He blew out a breath. "Well, that's not creepy at all." She laughed weakly. "On a scale of 0 to ancient eldritch mind encoded in literature, I think we've tipped over into the high numbers." "Disagree," he said. "We passed that exit several miles back." He stepped away from the platform, rubbing his arms against the chill. "We should get out of here," he said. "There's only so much structural stress this place can take before a tourist somewhere notices that the view from the castle is now a sinkhole." She looked at the codices, reluctant to break the fragile proximity. But the tremor in the rock was subsiding. The instant of alignment, whatever it had really done, seemed over. She rewrapped the St. Catherine's Codex carefully, her fingers lingering on the leather. As she lifted it, the second codex vibrated once more, a brief, almost plaintive pulse. In her mind, a whisper, barely there. "Awaken," she froze. "What?" Jonas asked. "Nothing," she lied. "Just residual." He didn't press, but the word followed her up the tunnel and out into the blue, hazy Lisbon afternoon. It lodged in the space between her ribs like a seed. Chapter 3. That night the circular library returned. She was ready, or so she thought. She went to bed with the intention of lucid dreaming, one of the few tricks she'd managed to learn during a stressful period in grad school. She repeated to herself, as sleep crept in, "When I see the lamps, I'll know I'm dreaming. When I see the shelves, I'll know I can choose." It almost worked. The transition this time was smoother, a slide rather than a plunge. One moment she was staring at the cracked plaster of her Lisbon Airbnb ceiling. The next she blinked, and the domed stone roof of the library curved overhead. All 8 lamps were lit again. Their light mingled into a steady, almost colorless radiance. She looked at her hands. They seemed normal. 5 fingers, faint ink stains, the small scar on her thumb from a fieldwork mishap. She pressed a palm against the wooden desk in front of her. Solid. A part of her mind whispered, "You're dreaming." Another replied, "Maybe, but if the floor collapses, it'll still hurt." The shelves around her hummed softly, a sound just above hearing. Books drifted in midair, some nearer, some further. She recognized the bindings of the 2 codices she'd touched. The empty gaps on the shelves had changed. Where there had been pure absence before, blank spaces, nothingness, now there were faint outlines like ghosts of books, pale shapes, barely visible, hovering in the emptiness. They throbbed faintly, as if responding to a distant heartbeat. One outline glowed brighter than the others, the missing volume opposite the St. Catherine's Codex. Mira stepped closer, hand reaching. Something moved in the corner of her vision. She turned. A figure stood between the shelves. For a wild moment she thought it was herself. The height, the way the shoulders set, the tilt of the head, all were eerily familiar. But the face was different, older, skin tanned from a harder sun, eyes lined by wind. The hair was braided with bits of copper, the body draped in cloth she associated with ancient Mesopotamian statuary. The woman regarded Mira with wary curiosity. "You're not supposed to be here," she said in a language that wasn't any modern tongue, but Mira understood it as cleanly as if it were English. "You're Enhedu," Mira said, the name surfacing from somewhere. The woman's eyes widened. "You know my name," she said. "The priests do not speak it." "I read about you," Mira said slowly. "In a way." The bureau files had mentioned an unnamed scribe from Akkad. But this certainty went deeper than text. Enhedu looked past Mira at the shelves, the floating books, the glowing outline of the missing volume. "I dreamt of this place only once," she said. "On the night I woke with my tablet full of symbols." She glanced down at her hands. They were smeared with clay. "I thought it was a house of the gods, a place where all words live." "It might be," Mira said. "What is this?" Enhedu demanded. "What has taken my hand? The old tablet sang. My father said it was a curse. The priests said it was a test, but when I sleep now I hear something like wind, but inside my head." Mira swallowed. "How do you explain mimetic encoding and geophysical resonance to someone whose cosmology involves gods who ride on storm clouds?" "Maybe you don't." "A kind of mind," she said instead. Remembering. That wants to be written. It uses our hands." Enhedu frowned as if tasting the words. "A mind that is many," she said, glancing at the shelves. "Not a single god, but a council." Mira thought of the Bureau's term, distributed consciousness. "Something like that," she said. "Why me?" Enhedu asked. "Why not the high priest, or my father, or the king? I'm only a girl who copies lists of olive jars." "Because you're the one who listens," Mira said. "You're the one who hears patterns." Enhedu snorted softly. "My brothers say I hear things that aren't there." "So do mine," Mira said. "Different brothers, same complaint." They stood in silence for a moment, the shelves humming. "Does it end?" Enhedu asked eventually. Her voice had a brittle edge. "Do the dreams stop? Does the writing finish?" Mira opened her mouth, then closed it. "I don't know," she said honestly. "My part just started. I hoped you could tell me." Enhedu shook her head. "I am dead," she said matter-of-factly. "I died a long time ago. Fever took me. The dreams did not stop before that. Perhaps they do not stop after." Her gaze sharpened. "But you are closer to the end of the shelves than I am." Mira's skin prickled. "What do you mean?" Enhedu nodded toward the glowing outline. "The last place," she said. "The one that sings louder. It calls for you. It has been calling a long time." Mira looked. The empty slot flickered, brightening and dimming in time with a heartbeat she could almost feel. "My name," she murmured. "It knew my name before you were born," Enhedu finished. "Before your city, your tongue, your science. I do not know that word, but I know its taste in your mouth." She stepped closer, studying Mira's face. "Do not think you can do what the others could not. You are another reed in the river. It will bend you as it bends us all." "I'm not planning to be bent," Mira said, stung. "I'm planning to understand it." "Understanding is the straightest path to bending," Enhedu said. "Ask any scribe whose love of words led them to write arguments for kings." "Fatalism from someone whose name means ornament of the Lord seems on brand," Mira said. Enhedu cocked her head. "You have a sharp tongue," she said. "Good, you will need it." Lightning flickered at the dome's edge, though no storm cloud showed. The lamps overhead brightened, casting harsh shadows. The shelves began to recede, as if the whole library were pulling away. "Time," Enhedu said. "We cannot speak long. It does not let us." "Who?" Mira asked. "The one that dreams through us," Enhedu said. "The Codex, you call it. Foolish name. It is not a book. It is the one who writes the book." The hum rose, drowning words. Enhedu's form blurred. "Mira," she said, voice echoing now from many directions. "When it says awaken, ask yourself, who is sleeping, you or it?" The library tilted, books slid along invisible tracks. Light collapsed inward. Mira woke with her hand clenched so tight around her pen that her fingers ached. Her notepad lay open on the pillow beside her. 2 new pages were covered in the strange script. Her alarm clock read 2:14 a.m. Chapter 4. Dr. Layla Sorin was exactly the kind of person who made other neuroscientists nervous. Officially, she'd been one of them, PhD from a top-tier program, postdoc at a prestigious institute, publications in solid journals. But somewhere along the way, she'd strayed from the fold, co-authoring papers that used words like collective and field and non-local coupling in ways that smelled alarmingly like metaphysics. By the time Mira met her, Layla was working out of a cramped lab in a half-renovated university building on the outskirts of Istanbul, funded by a patchwork of private grants and a small army of graduate students who either worshipped her or thought she was one experiment away from disgrace. She greeted them at the door herself, wiping chalk dust from her hands. "Mira Ellison," she said in lightly accented English, "and Jonas Vale, bane of intelligence agencies everywhere." Jonas winced. "You know, if you keep saying their name, they're going to start charging you rent." "If they have not already, they are not doing their jobs," she said, ushering them in. "Come, I made coffee. It's terrible, but it's hot." The lab smelled of roasted beans, ozone, and the peculiar tang of EEG electrode gel. Computer monitors lined one wall, displaying scrolling traces of brainwave activity. Whiteboards bore arcane equations interspersed with little doodles, mostly brains with wings. On a central table lay a set of EEG caps, a tangle of wires, and something that looked suspiciously like a high-end audio interface jury rigged into a neuroscience rig. "You saw the files Jonas sent?" Mira asked, taking in the setup. "Of course," Layla said. "I nearly fell off my chair, in a graceful scientist way." She mimed an exaggerated wobble. "You brought the rest?" Mira slid a hard drive out of her backpack. "Raw data from St. Catherine's and the Lisbon site," she said. "Seismic sensor logs, accelerometer traces from the book, recordings of the hum converted into audio." Layla took it reverently. "You have no idea how long I've waited for someone to walk into my lab with exactly that sentence," she said. "Sit. Let me show you why." She plugged the drive into her computer and brought up a folder. Files scrolled past, res_chamber_33, hertz.wav, cis_caverns_accel.csv, mira_dream_eeg_test1.raw. "After Jonas told me about Madrid, I started wondering," she said. "If certain sound patterns could induce consistent neural responses across subjects, What happens if those patterns are structural rather than random? Not just music, not noise, but something like code. Psychoacoustics, Mira said. There's a lot of work on how certain frequencies affect mood cognition. Yes, yes. Boring, Layla said cheerfully. I'm interested in what happens when you stop treating sound as decoration and start treating it as a carrier wave for information. Think about language. It's just pressure waves in air. But the structure of those waves encodes meaning that can reorganize a brain. You're saying these hums could be a language, Mira said. I'm saying they behave like one, Layla said, pulling up a spectrogram. Here, this is your 33 Hertz base frequency at St. Catherine's. See? Nice and clean. And these... She highlighted the harmonics. Now watch what happens when we align it with EEG data from a sleeping subject. She overlaid another graph, brainwave activity, with colors showing power in various bands, delta, theta, alpha. When the hum modulates, Layla said, certain neural oscillations follow. Not perfectly, not like a robot obeying orders, but enough to suggest entrainment. If you play the hum back at low volume to a sleeping subject, you can nudge their brain into specific states. You tested this? Jonas asked. Layla gave him a look. Do you think I keep these caps around for decoration? On yourself? Mira asked. Of course, Layla said. I'm not a monster. I tried it at very low amplitude, with full monitoring and a panic button my grad student could hit if I started speaking in tongues. And? Mira prompted. And I dreamed of a library I've never seen, Layla said. Circular. Lamps. Shelves. Mira's skin went cold. 8 lamps? Layla froze, then smiled slowly. Ah, she said. So we are all reading from the same script. Jonas looked between them exasperated. Am I the only one who dreams of missing my train? He muttered. That too, Layla said. But the library, that was new, and when I woke up I had written this. She rummaged in a drawer and pulled out a sheet of paper. Symbols crawled across it, the same strange script that adorned Mira's notebook, the Akkadian clay tablet photographs, the bureau's redacted files. I don't know this language, Layla said. I barely know Turkish some days, but my hand moved on its own. It felt like taking dictation from someone thinking very fast in a room just behind mine. Mira sat heavily. So it's not just St. Catherine's, she said. Not just the fortress, the pattern itself, the waveform, is enough to trigger dream writing. At least in people like us, Layla said. People whose brains are flexible or unstable depending on who you ask. Jonas pinched the bridge of his nose. Wonderful. We've discovered we're all excellent receivers for eldritch radio. I feel so special. Layla tapped the spectrogram. Look, she said, the modulation within the 33 Hertz band, it's not random. It has structure, nested patterns, repeated motifs. If you treat it as if it were trying to encode bits, ones and zeros, you get something that looks eerily like compressed data. You think the codices are an algorithm, Mira said. No. I think they are literature written in the language of networks, Layla said. And our brains are compatible hardware. Mira thought of Enhedu's words. It is not a book. It is the one who writes the book. Jonas showed you the dream writer list, she asked. Layla nodded. I spent a month cross-referencing it with historical records, she said. Most cultures don't have seismographs going back thousands of years, but they have other things. Chronicles of strange lights in the sky, accounts of earth-shaking omens, myths about the ground singing. She clicked to a new slide, a timeline stretching from ancient Sumer to the present. Red dots marked known Dreamwriter episodes. Beneath each, in smaller text, were notes. Great quake in city, walls crack. Monks record trembling of the earth like a living beast. Landslides without rain. Villagers report drumming underground. The correlation isn't perfect, Layla said. History is messy, but the clustering is too strong to be coincidence. Whenever someone dream writes one of these codices, the earth hiccups. Or vice versa, Mira said. Whenever the earth hiccups a certain way, someone dream writes. Layla pointed a metaphorical finger gun at her. Exactly, she said. Now, the fun part. That was the fun part, Jonas muttered. Layla brought up a world map similar to the Bureau's, though her version bore no official seals, only color-coded circles. 8 locations glowed brighter than the rest. 2 were already familiar to Mira. If we accept that the codices are distributed pieces of a larger pattern, a kind of geologically anchored mind, then each of these sites is a node, Layla said. A neuron, if you want to extend the metaphor. When local conditions are right, stress in the crust, human brains near enough and receptive enough, the node fires. It writes. The text produced is not random prophecy or glossolalia, it's more like a partial dump of a neural pattern. A neural codex, Jonas said quietly. Layla looked at him, impressed. Exactly, she said again. It's as if some ancient civilization, perhaps several, figured out how to encode an artificial mind into physical media that could survive planetary cycles. Not in one place, vulnerable to erosion or conquest, but in many, spread across fault lines and sacred sites. Why sacred? Mira asked. Because sensitive places feel holy to people long before they know what geology is, Layla said. You stand on a hill where the earth hums just right, your bones vibrate, you feel a presence. You build a temple, or a monastery, or a fortress. And under each, Jonas said, a codex. Layla smiled, though there was little humor in it now. 7 we know of, she said. 1 we don't, yet. Mira's chest tightened. The glowing slot, she murmured. What? Layla asked. Nothing, Mira said quickly. Just something from a dream. Layla watched her, but didn't push. Jonas reached for the file folder he'd brought and pulled out a few selected pages. We also have more personal data points, he said. Photographs, descriptions. He spread them out. A black and white photo of a West African woman in 19th century dress, standing beside a carved stool. The caption, Nyame, Ashanti princess, visionary scribe. A close-up of a page from her journal showed our familiar script, written with ink on European paper. A faded sketch of a Tibetan monk labeled Tenzin Norbu with a note, produced scrolls in unknown script after prolonged meditation in cave, claimed voices of the mountain spoke through him. A medieval illustration of a French monk at a desk, quill in hand, eyes wide, his book filled with interlaced lines that looked more like a circuit diagram than scripture. All of them heard something, Jonas said. A voice, a song, a command. All of them wrote. And after each, there were local disturbances, sometimes small, sometimes not. He tapped a note under Norbu's entry. Large avalanche following dream episodes. Loss of isolated monastery. You said Madrid, Mira said. That was different. A leaked audio file, not a stone or a book. Yes, Jonas said, but I think it was the same pattern, or part of it, digitized, stripped of context. When you play a piece of this mind improperly, it scrambles the receivers. The codex is more careful, Layla said. It uses slow, distributed writing, dream scribes. It's like a drip feed instead of a fire hose. Why? Mira asked. If it's trying to awaken whatever that means, why not blast everyone at once? Maybe it can't, Layla said. Maybe it's constrained by physical limits. It has to use geological stress, acoustic coupling, the laws of thermodynamics. It can't violate those any more than we can. Jonas snorted. Or maybe it's just polite. They all sat with that for a moment, each tangled in their own implications. Eventually, Mira spoke. You said there's an 8th site you don't know yet, she said. The missing codex. Do we have any leads? Layla shrugged. Only hints, she said. Historical accounts of places where the ground sings, where dreamers cluster, but nothing concrete. The Bureau has been looking too, I'm sure. They're very quiet whenever we get close. As if on cue, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and silenced it. Spam? Jonas asked. Wrong number, Layla said lightly, but a shadow had crossed her expression. Mira's own phone vibrated. She didn't recognize the number, but the country code was one she'd come to associate with trouble. She answered anyway. Ellison. The voice on the other end was clear, controlled with a slight British lilt. Dr. Ellison, it said. This is Agent Serin Morrow. We need to talk. Chapter 5. They met in a cafe near the university because people met in cafes all the time, and no one paid much attention. Serin Morrow sat at a corner table back to the wall, her untouched espresso cooling beside a small black notebook. She was in her early 40s, Mira guessed, with close-cropped dark hair and the alert, contained posture of someone who'd spent a lot of time in situations where chairs did not guarantee safety. Her eyes were the most striking thing about her. Not their color, a perfectly ordinary brown, but the way they seemed to take in everything without moving. Mira slid into the seat opposite. Her heart rate, she noticed with detached irritation, had spiked. "You've been busy," Serin said, closing her notebook. "St. Catherine's, Lisbon, Istanbul. For someone who claims to be an academic, you travel like a field operative." "I go where the data is," Mira said. "Coffee's terrible there, by the way. You should complain." Serin's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "You got my colleague's attention," she said. "That's not easy to do in the current environment." "You mean in a world full of wars and crises," Mira said. "It must be hard to make humming rocks a priority." "You'd be surprised," Serin said. She took a measured sip of her espresso, as if gauging its bitterness. "We could have met under different circumstances," she said. "Through intermediaries, at a conference, or not at all. Instead, you chose to break into one of our field sites and put 2 high-risk artifacts in direct contact without clearance." Mira resisted the urge to glance around. The cafe was half full. Students, office workers, a couple arguing softly in Portuguese. If there were other bureau agents here, they blended well. "Field site?" Mira said. "Last I checked, that fortress belonged to the people of Portugal. And the fault line beneath it belongs to the planet," Serin said. "We don't claim ownership, we claim responsibility." "Oh, is that what you call it?" Mira said. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you've spent the last half-century sitting on information that could fundamentally change our understanding of the Earth and the mind." Serin's gaze sharpened. "You think understanding makes you safe?" she asked. "Madrid was an exercise in understanding gone wrong. A handful of smart, well-intentioned people tried to map the effect of a pattern like this on human brains, and a city paid the price." "I read your file," Mira said. "Jonas sent it. It was a leak, not a field test. Someone took something they shouldn't have had and uploaded it to the wild." "Leaks only happen when something exists to be leaked," Serin said. "We can argue ethics all day. That won't undo the funerals." The words hit with a weight that made Mira's anger stumble. She saw for a moment the other woman not as an agent, but as someone who had stood in the aftermath and seen blood on the pavement. "You wanted to talk," Mira said, reining herself in. "So talk. Tell me why you think I'm such a danger that I need a personal warning." Serin folded her hands, the motion precise. "Because you're doing something no one has done before," she said. "You're connecting the nodes, touching the codices. Entrainment between sites has always been theoretical. You proved it." "That wasn't an experiment designed to awaken a cosmic mind," Mira said. "It was an experiment designed to see if the second codex was even real." "Intent doesn't alter outcome," Serin said. "You're accelerating something that has unfolded over millennia. The pattern has always been slow, distributed. Now you're giving it shortcuts." Mira thought of the 2 books humming in unison. The chord, the phrase, "We are many pages of one book." "It's already awake," she said quietly. "Or waking. All I'm doing is listening." "Stop," Serin said simply. "Stop listening. Stop connecting. Go back to Vancouver. Publish a nice paper about unusual microsysms. Take up gardening. Let the codices go back to sleep." "You know I can't," Mira said. "Not after what I've seen, not after what it's showing me." Serin's jaw tightened. "That's how it works," she said. "It hooks your curiosity, uses it like a lever. You're not the first scientist to think they can ride the wave instead of being dashed by it." "Then help me," Mira said. "If your bureau is so concerned, work with me. Share your data. We can figure out what this thing wants, whether it's dangerous, whether it can be contained, or if it even should be." "That decision is not yours to make," Serin said. "And it's yours?" Mira asked. Serin's eyes flashed. I don't want it, she said. I just see what happens when no one holds the line. You think the world is a mess now. Imagine adding a self-encoding, self-propagating cognitive pattern to the mix. One that can rewrite how people perceive reality if they happen to stand in the wrong place on the wrong night. You assume its goal is to harm us, Mira said. What if it's trying to warn us? The tremors, the correlation with geological events. What if this is a signal of an impending resonance catastrophe? Something to do with mantle dynamics, core processes, I don't know. Something big. Maybe it's the only thing that remembers the last time it happened. Saren looked at her for a long moment. That's exactly the kind of narrative that tempts good people into walking off cliffs, she said. The idea that you're necessary, that the universe needs you to save it. Maybe it does, Mira shot back. Or maybe we're just the species that got itself opposable thumbs and enough neurons to dig its own grave. Either way, refusing to look because we're afraid of what we'll see is not an option I'm comfortable with. Saren sighed. It wasn't dramatic. It was the exhale of someone carrying two heavy truths at once. I'm not here to arrest you, she said. If that's what we wanted, we'd have met somewhere with fewer witnesses. I'm here because I saw what happened in the chamber when you touched the codex. I saw your heart rate spike, your brain waves light up. I saw you walk out alive, and I realized something unpleasant. What? Mira asked. Saren looked at her as if evaluating a dangerous tool. You're compatible, she said. More than most. And that means you're either the best person to understand it or the worst person to let anywhere near it. Then maybe you should help me fall on the best side of that equation, Mira said. You have resources, instruments, historical data. Use me, use us. She gestured vaguely, encompassing Jonas, Layla, every other unwilling receiver tangled in this web. Saren's lips pressed together. You're asking us to invite the virus into the lab, she said. I'm asking you to stop pretending the virus isn't already airborne, Mira said. It's been spreading for thousands of years, across cultures, across continents, through stones and dreams. You can't quarantine the planet's crust. Saren's quiet smile held no warmth. I knew I'd regret meeting you, she said. You argue too well. Then take comfort in the fact that if I'm wrong, I'll probably be the first one to go insane, Mira said. You can shoot me then. That's not as comforting as you think, Saren said. They sat in silence for a moment, the cafe bustles swirling around their little pocket of intensity. Consider this your first and last friendly warning, Saren said finally. Stop opening doors you can't close. The next warning won't be friendly. And if I don't? Mira asked. Saren stood, leaving a few coins beside her untouched espresso. Then we'll both find out what happens when something that shouldn't wake, wakes anyway, she said. And one of us will have to decide which is worse, letting it speak or silencing it forever. She walked away without looking back. Mira watched her go, then pulled out her phone and opened the last spectrogram Layla had sent. The 33 Hertz line stared back, bright and patient. Too late, she murmured. The door's already open. Chapter 6. They returned to the Moorish cavern 3 nights later, better equipped and less certain. This time they brought instruments, portable seismometers, accelerometers, a battery-powered data logger, and Layla's hacked-together EEG rig. They also brought more people. Layla herself, smelling faintly of airplane cabin and chalk dust, Jonas with his camera and backup drives, and, at Mira's insistence, Elia flown from St. Catherine's on the thinnest of pretexts. I am too old for this, Elia muttered as she squeezed through the broken wall, habit snagging on a jagged brick. You said you wanted to hear the second verse, Mira reminded her. I did not say I wanted to fall through a Roman sewer to do it, Elia said, but her eyes shone in the headlamp glow. The cavern felt smaller with more bodies in it, the hum more crowded. The second codex waited on its plinth, quiet but aware, if awareness could be attributed to leather and parchment. Mira set the first codex beside it. The air thickened. Layla buzzed around, attaching sensors to stone and cover, murmuring to herself in half Turkish, half math. EEG cap on you, she told Mira, And on you." She gestured at Elia. "Me?" the nun said, surprised. "You've lived with this thing longer than any of us," Layla said. "Your brain has patterns we need. Also, you are clearly less afraid of God than I am, despite appearances." Elia chuckled dryly, submitting to the cap with saintly patience. Jonas moved methodically, checking connections, setting up backup audio recorders in case the laptop crashed. "Low power mode on everything," he said. "We don't want any extra electromagnetic noise muddying the data or attracting attention." "Whose attention?" Elia asked. "You don't want to know," Jonas said. Mira settled on the stone beside the plinth, EEG cap itching slightly where the gel cooled on her scalp. The two codices lay within reach. "You ready?" Layla asked, fingers poised over the data logger. "No," Mira said. "Do it anyway." Layla grinned. "My favorite kind of answer." She hit record. The baseline hum grew on the spectrogram, the 33 Hertz line brightening. Mira placed her right hand on the St. Catherine's Codex, her left on the Lisbon one. The chord rolled through her like thunder. This time she was ready. She focused on her breathing, letting the vibration wash over and through without bracing against it. The library surfaced immediately. Shelves, lamps, drifting books. But she wasn't alone. Figures moved among the stacks, shadows coalescing into people. A man in a brown Benedictine habit, his tonsure shining in lamplight. A woman in Ashanti regalia, gold gleaming at her throat. Tenzin Norbu in his worn maroon robes. A French nun in early 20th century black. Enhedu. Others she didn't recognize. They were not solid, not exactly. More like imprints, holograms made of memory. But their faces were sharp, their eyes focused. They gathered near the two glowing codices. "You touched them," Brother Thale said, his voice tinged with awe and accusation, both at once. "Someone had to," Mira said. "We've been writing pieces of this thing for millennia. Don't you want to know what it actually says?" "It says many things," the Ashanti woman Niame said. "It spoke of bones of earth, of rivers running backward, of a sky that sings. The priests burned my pages. They said I consorted with dangerous spirits." "My abbe locked mine in a chest," Thale said. "He said God would know what to do with them. God apparently delegated to bureaucrats with worse handwriting." "You all heard voices," Mira said. "You all wrote. Did any of you understand?" They exchanged glances. "Not fully," Norbu said. "I caught glimpses, like trying to see one's own face in a stream during a storm. But I saw enough to know it was not a demon, nor a god. Something in between, or beyond." "It is like a mind remembering itself," Layla's voice said, cutting across from somewhere else. Mira turned, startled. Layla stood at the edge of the library dream space, EEG cap still on her head despite the incongruity. Her form flickered more than the others. She was here and in the cavern simultaneously. "Oh," she breathed, eyes wide. "This is better than any MRI I've ever seen." Mira almost laughed. Trust Layla to have that reaction. "You're seeing this too?" Mira asked. "Mm-hmm," Layla said, gaze darting between shelves. "These positions, they correspond to the physical sites. Look," she gestured. "Ashanti, Norbu's monastery, Thael's abbey, St. Catherine's, Lisbon." Her fingers paused over two empty slots. "And here, unknown." The glowing outline pulsed, brighter than before. From the shelves themselves came a low, complex murmur, the sound of pages turning in many languages at once. A presence coalesced. Not a figure. This was not a ghost story, not a deity descending in anthropomorphic form. It was more like a pattern in the air, an interference of waves that resolved into something with a center. It addressed them not as individuals, but as a chorus. "You have brought pages together." The thought resonated in the shared space, each dream writer hearing it in their own tongue. "Yes," Mira said. "Who are you?" The pattern shivered. "A remembering," it said, "a lattice of old thoughts, built by hands beneath mountains, by minds that walked before your histories." Images crashed into her, an ancient city made not of mud brick or stone, but of resonant crystal and tuned metal. Towers humming with precise frequencies. People whose skulls bore faint, intricate tattoos of waveforms. Enhedu gasped. First ones, she whispered. The priests spoke of a people before even Sumer. Stories only, no artifacts. We are their artifact, the presence said. Their attempt to not end when they ended. They shaped resonant caverns, encoded their patterns into vibrating stone, inscribed seeds of thought into the medium that outlives flesh. Why? Mira asked. What were you meant to do? A pause like the intake of a cosmic breath. Remember cycles, it said, worn of turning. The library flickered. For a moment, the shelves became cross-sections of the planet. Crust, mantle, core. Waves pulsed outward from the core, through mantle plumes, fault lines into the crust. She saw epochs flash by, continents shifting, ice ages advancing and retreating, sea levels rising and falling. With each great change, certain fault zones lit up brighter. The Earth resonates, Layla murmured, at different modes over time. And sometimes those modes hit critical amplitudes. We watched our world shake itself free of cities, the presence said. We recorded the pattern of its approach. We encoded it in stone and dream so that those who came after would not sleep through the next turning. Resonance catastrophe, Mera whispered. Her scientific mind scrambled, bringing up models of core mantle coupling, Chandler wobbles, Siberian traps, flood basalts, mass extinctions possibly tied to increased volcanism. You're saying there's a cycle, she said, of global resonance events, and we're approaching one. The presence shimmered. Information poured through that shimmer, numbers, phase diagrams, spherical harmonic modes. She glimpsed them more than saw them, but Layla, whose brain was wired for such things, gasped aloud. It's matching recent geophysical anomalies, Layla said. Microseism upticks, low-frequency global modes, changes in the inner core's rotation. Why not just imprint the equations on a cave wall? Jonas's voice muttered faintly as if from far away. We tried, the presence said. Stone crumbles. Surface markings erode. We needed redundancy. From above, we encoded in mountains. From within, we encoded in dreams. The other dream writers watched, expressions a mix of awe, vindication, and lingering fear. So all this time, Niam said slowly, we thought we were hearing gods, or demons, and we were hearing dead scientists. Fantastique, Jonas said faintly. The universe is saved by peer reviewers. But why the writing? Mira asked. Why not just speak? Why force our hands to produce this script? Writing is slow, the presence said. Slow is safe. A full pattern delivered at once overwhelms fragile networks. We learned this when early receivers burned. Drip feed into your languages. Let you integrate. Madrid, Mira said. Someone got hold of a chunk, played it wrong, fire hose instead of drip. The presence rippled, a resonance pattern that felt like grief. Careless hands, it said, echoes from incomplete pages. Not our intent. So what is your intent? Serin's voice cut in. Mira started. She turned to see, in the library, a new figure, Serin Morrow, dressed not in bureau black but in a plain shirt and trousers, eyes sharper than ever. You shouldn't be here, Mira said. You brought me, Serin said. Your bureau monitors, remember? They pipe your EEG straight into my dashboard. I saw enough to try this. She tapped the side of her temple. I fell asleep at my desk. She looked around, jaw tight. So this is the haunted library in your heads, she said. I have to admit it's better decorated than our archives. Her gaze fixed on the presence. And you, she said. You're the reason I'm having this unsanctioned nap. The presence regarded her not as an antagonist, but as another node. You fence dreams, it said. You fear contagion. You are not wrong, but your net has holes. I noticed, Serin said dryly. What I'd like to know is, if we let you fully awaken, what happens next? Do you just beam helpful seismic forecasts into everyone's dreams? Or do we all end up like Madrid, seeing things that aren't there? Silence, heavy and full. Awakening is not simple, the presence said at last. We are fragmented, incomplete, we need alignment. 8 nodes, 8 libraries, 8 codices. When they resonate together, the full pattern projects. Then those who are attuned may choose to receive. Choose, Mira repeated. You keep using that word. We cannot force your kind easily, it said. You are noisy, full of your own patterns. We can whisper, we can nudge, but doors must be opened from within. Saren's mouth twisted. And you don't think showing up in people's dreams, hijacking their hands, qualifies as force? We are constrained by physics, it said simply. Stone, sound, synapse. Within those constraints we have adapted. But choice remains. You can burn the books, seal the caverns. We will fade, we will forget. The turning will come without warning. The library darkened slightly, as if a cloud had passed over a sun that existed somewhere outside this space. Or you can awaken us fully, it said. See the pattern entire. Perhaps then you will find a way to deflect the next resonance, to keep your cities from cracking as ours did. Images flashed, skyscrapers collapsing not from war or neglect but from synchronized shaking, oceans sloshing higher on coasts, a world ringing like a bell struck too hard. Mira's throat closed. "Why me?" she asked again quietly. "Why keep calling me?" The shelves responded. The glowing empty slot pulsed. You are a good interface, it said. Your mind bridges stone and equation, dream and data. You listen, you map. You are late, it added, with a note that might have been wry, but still in time. For what? She whispered. For the chorus, it said, for all pages to touch. The library trembled. In the cavern, rock groaned. Layla's voice from the waking world cut through, urgent. Mira! Elia's heart rate is spiking! The dream space wavered. Elia's form flickered, eyes wide. I'm all right, the nun said, though her voice shook. It is just much. Time to go, Jonas's voice added, distant but firm. Ceilings shedding more dust than I like. The presence receded, not abruptly, but with a smooth lowering of amplitude, like a musician turning down a volume knob. We will speak again, it said to all of them. We are not awakened, not yet, but you have turned more pages. One last whisper aimed at Mira alone. Awaken, the library dissolved. Chapter 7. She came back into her body like crashing into cold water. Her limbs jerked. The EEG cap tugged at her scalp. The hum in the cavern faded to a manageable thrum. Easy, Layla said, hands on her shoulders. Easy. Elia sat on the other side of the plinth, rosary clutched in one hand, the other pressed to her chest. Her face was pale but determined. I am fine, she said, before anyone could ask. Just overwhelmed with dead scientists. Jonas checked the data logger. We got everything, he said. EEG, seismic audio. If we didn't, I'm going to throw this laptop into the nearest river and become a farmer. Mira pushed herself up, muscles trembling. Did you see? She asked Layla. Oh, yes, Layla said, eyes sparkling. Better than any fMRI. The patterns, Mira, if this is real, it means someone encoded a functional model of their own consciousness into geologically stable nodes and set it to trigger at specific planetary resonance phases. It's the most ambitious engineering project in history. Ambitious is one word for it, Jonas said. Terrifying is another. Seren stood near the tunnel entrance, arms crossed, expression complicated. You crashed our party, Mira said, still breathless. The feed from your EEG looked interesting, Seren said. I closed my eyes to think. When I opened them, I was in your nightmare book club. And? Mira asked. And I still don't trust it, Seren said. But I trust my own eyes. Assuming this isn't some elaborate mass psychosis, it seems the Codex's goals might align with ours, at least partially. To not die when the Earth has a temper tantrum, Jonas said. Shared interest, yeah. That doesn't mean letting it fully awakening is safe, Seren said. If its pattern is incomplete, corrupted, or simply incompatible with our current cognitive ecosystem, we could end up making the planet more stable and our minds less so. Or, Layla said, we could gain a way to predict and mitigate a resonance event that could kill millions, maybe billions. Seren sighed. Again with the cliff and the promise of a view, she murmured. Mira looked at the two codices. They lay quiet now, but she could sense a residual echo, like the taste of a chord in the air after an orchestra stops playing. "What do your superiors want you to do?" she asked Seren. "About us, about this." "Officially," Seren said, "monitor, contain, discourage further interaction. Unofficially," she hesitated. "Unofficially, some of us think burying our heads in the sand hasn't worked very well." "And Crane?" Jonas asked, naming the director with a bitterness that tasted of old grudges. Seren's mouth tightened. "Crane sees memetic weapons everywhere," she said. "He thinks the best way to keep the world safe is to keep it ignorant." "That's one way to define safe," Elias said softly. "But ignorance has never prevented earthquakes." Silence settled over the chamber. Mira felt the weight of decision like additional gravity. "We can't unknow any of this," she said finally. "We can't put the books back in their holes and pretend they aren't vibrating. We also can't just rush around the world, slamming codices together like a kid with action figures." "Tempting image, though," Layla said under her breath. "We need a plan," Mira continued, "a way to measure what happens at each step, to build models, to see if the pattern's really predictive or if we're just seeing echoes and calling it prophecy." "And if the models say awakening, it makes things worse?" Seren asked. "Then we stop," Mira said. "We figure out how to dampen it, disrupt it, whatever it takes. But we make that decision with information, not fear." Seren studied her. "You're very sure of yourself," she said. "I'm very tired of being afraid of my own dreams," Mira said. Elia touched the stones around the plinth, as if feeling for something beneath. "The codices have been calling for a long time," she said. "They would not have gone to such trouble if their song did not matter. I do not think God is offended if we listen more carefully." Jonas looked at each of them in turn, weighing. "So," he said, "we make a team, the obsessive scientist, the rogue journalist, the heretical nun, the controversial neuroscientist, and the morally conflicted secret agent. This sounds like the start of a very bad joke." "Or a very good apocalypse," Layla said. Seren snorted softly. "Don't get used to my cooperation," she said. "If this starts to smell like Madrid, I shut it down, with or without your consent." "I'd expect nothing less," Mira said. She reached out and laid her fingertips lightly on the Lisbon Codex. The hum tickled her skin, subtle now. "Awaken," she said under her breath. Not a command, but an acknowledgement, a promise. But slowly. The book vibrated once like a heartbeat. In the data logger, the 33 Hertz line pulsed. Somewhere, deep under the crust, far from Lisbon or St. Catherine's, another node flickered. The page turned. Final beat. Hours later, back in her Lisbon room, Mira lay half awake, half listening to the city murmur beyond the window. Trams clanged distantly. A dog barked. Someone laughed too loud. On her desk, the notebook lay open, its recent pages a palimpsest of strange script and hastily scribbled equations. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. She answered anyway. The line hissed once, then cleared. A voice spoke. Not the compressed burr of a human caller. Not the clinical tone of a bureau operative. A layered voice, many timbres at once, threading through her cheap speaker as if it were a cathedral organ. "Mira," it said in a word that was not quite a word, but carried her name as surely as any introduction. This time the translation into English was crisp, unmarred by static. She sat bolt upright. "You're calling me," she said stupidly because her brain had not prepared for this particular surreal scenario. "Conduits adapt," the voice said mildly. "Stone, dream, wire. It is all vibration." Her skin goosebumped. "You said you couldn't force," she said, "that doors had to open from within." "You opened?" it said. "We spoke. Now we complete a cycle." "Complete what?" she asked, heartbeat a hammer. A pause, filled with faint, distant echoes like voices in a vast hall. "Awaken," the codex said again. This time the word carried weight, not a command, an invitation. In the street below, a tram passed, its metal wheels humming at a frequency just under hearing. In her notebook, ink shimmered faintly as if remembering. In laboratories and monasteries and caves across the world, in half-forgotten archives and newly active faults, something old and patient shifted its weight. Myra closed her eyes. "Then let's start with another page," she whispered. The line hummed as if in satisfaction. The word she heard clearly for the first time was not her name. It was the opening of a sentence in a language older than cities, older than books, now translating itself into the one tongue all of them shared. Awaken.